Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining us for this special Facebook Live. I'm Brandon Waltons. I'm joined by Luke Macias, Jeremy Kitchen here. On my side here is we're kind of pouring over, looking at some of these new proposed congressional district maps. Okay, the Texas legislature right now is in their third special session. Part of the call for that, of course, is redistricting, redrawing those maps. For the Congress, that actually means adding 2 extra seats because of some increases in Texas's population. And so we've got the Senate's first proposal of what those maps should look like. And, we're kind of looking through those and decided, well, let's bring in folks right now. And so if you're watching us live, that's great. First of all, kind of big picture, Luke, I'll go to you first. What's your takeaway from looking at these maps before we look at some of these specific regions?
Yeah. So Texas got 2 new congressional districts, right, throughout the redistricting process, meaning we will have net 2+ congressmen by the end of this election cycle. Essentially, they gave one of those seats to the Republicans and one of those seats to the Democrats, drawing a very, very Democrat district in Travis County, and then one safely reliable Republican seat in the Houston area. Then they shored up all of the incumbents. They made one Democrat seat winnable by a Republican, kind of flipping a barely Democrat district to now just a little bit red. And so what we will probably end up with is one more Republican seat out of the cycle. I mean, if these maps went into effect and election took place, we would expect to see one net Republican congressman out of the state of Texas, probably in the South Texas region. And then they basically took one of their new districts and shoved every single Democrat they could shove into it. It's a plus 58 Biden district is one of the new districts. So they did that, and that helped them shore up and protect a lot of the incumbents. The big message coming out of today is incumbents are protected in both parties. And so that's kind of the observations.
Yeah, I mean, it's a partisan exercise for sure, but
Yep.
Jeremy, you've talked about this before. The process of redistricting is often a very partisan exercise.
Yeah, I mean, it's the thing that's sold as the most, it's supposed to be non-political, but it is the most political thing, right? And it's also something I like to point out that, we like to think, like, everyone that's kind of tuning in now, it's like, oh, we're hearing about it now. But the reality is this has been happening for the better part of 2 years, right? Like, there's things happening behind the scenes, negotiations happening between leadership and members, right? And it's all kind of culminating now. And keep in mind, this is the delayed redistricting process, right? This was supposed to take place in the regular legislative session. So,
Right, and so, yeah, exactly right. This is something that normally would have been happening during the spring because of COVID, right? Delays everything. We get census data delayed, and so now lawmakers finally looking at drawing those maps that'll be in place for the next 10 years. Let's take a look at a few specific observations. First, in the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex area, kind of looking at those maps as compared to what the maps currently look like right now. Luke, it looks like Beth Van Dyne, a congresswoman from up there, has really bolstered her district there for Republicans.
Yeah, so incumbent protection across the board. And so if you're Michelle Beckley, her Democrat opponent now, this map does not bode well for her bid against Van Dyne. I honestly wouldn't be surprised if we see Beckley reconsider her decision to even run in that seat because
Michelle Beckley, a state representative currently, who is not, I believe, has been drawn out entirely of this congressional district that she announced when she was in D.C. During the quorum bust of the legislature earlier, when she was hiding out in D.C., decided, I kind of want to stay here, so I'm going to run for Congress. And now it looks like that door's probably been shut for her.
Absolutely. I mean, it went from being a district that Biden won by 5. So Van Dyne got elected in the district, but people were voting for Biden and Beth. And now it is a Trump plus 12. So this is a district that has been moved 17 points in the red category. If you're a Democrat, you're not interested in running for it right now.
What are some other observations as we look at some of these changes in the DFW Metroplex?
I think there's a few. Certainly you see I think it's Congressional District 13 with Ronnie Jackson, right, former doctor of President Trump. His district extends more into Denton County than it did previously, right? And as we were kind of talking candidly about Denton earlier, there's an echo chamber that exists in kind of the more progressive communities in Denton, and there's certainly even more of an echo chamber now, if you will, because of how they they extended that district. You have one that was notable to me is Congressional District 12, which is Kay Granger's seat. Currently, you might recall, of course, she had a heated primary last go around.
That's right.
That district has been kind of split, especially in Parker County, where now, if these maps are approved, you've got Congressional District 25, which is currently represented by Roger Williams, right? And so that'll be interesting too, to kind of see how that plays out, I guess, here, into whether that maintains or holds through the remainder of this special session.
I think probably one of the biggest questions people usually have when they look at these maps is they'll look and they'll say, well, how exactly did we come to decide that it should, squiggle around like that? And
Yep.
You can see if you look kind of the details, you get, you get all sorts of
Yes.
strange shapes, right?
Yep.
It's gerrymandering. Is that a good thing? Is that a bad thing?
I mean, at the end of the day, what they have done is taken Mark Vesey's district and made it. I mean, they've found every single Democrat enclave they could possibly find and drawn them, and so it makes this very strange machination of a district. And so, yeah, very interesting. Elzey's the same way. They took Jake Elzey, who lives in Waxahachie, and instead of giving him this kind of section of Tarrant County like he had before, they brought him all the way through the Metroplex into some Democrat territories that they didn't want to give to Van Dyne and they didn't want to give to other Republicans that they're trying to shore up. And so really the creativity that they applied, I think you end up with some very strange districts. DFW by far will go to some of the other regions. It's the most convoluted in its design.
Okay.
I think Jeremy also makes a good point with the Chris Putnam race
Yes.
that they
CD12,
really are.
yeah.
That's right. And Kay Granger, they took away portions of Parker County and Wise County because these counties were counties that were less favorable to her as an incumbent Republican. And so trying to protect her in a primary, it makes sense that she's trying to kind of consolidate the amount of outside Tarrant County representation she has.
So you think this CD12 change here is one that's probably meant to protect Kay Granger?
Absolutely. Most incumbents get protected. That's not to say that Kay Granger's probably not still vulnerable. I mean, her record speaks for itself, and the area that she represents is still a very conservative area in Tarrant and Parker County. Roger Williams takes some of those areas, and he's from Parker, has a lot of connections in Parker, has his car dealerships
right,
in Parker
out that way.
County, on the board of TCU. So he's got a
Right.
lot more connections there in Tarrant and Parker. This district probably fits him as an individual better than his previous district.
Okay. Any other observations up here in DFW before we move a little south?
You have Van Taylor, who goes into Hunt County. This is the same thing that the Senate did with Angela Paxton. Collin County is an ever-changing region that is becoming increasingly more competitive. And so in order to shore up both Angela Paxton in the Senate and Van Taylor in Congress, they both reached into the Greenville, Hunt County area. So it kind of seems obvious that that's something they're going to be doing.
And that's Congressional District 3, and then Angela Paxton would be Senate District 8, which
Yes.
we talk about in the article too. So.
Yep.
Excellent, excellent. Let's move a little south. Let me pull up these maps for Austin, which is actually one of the areas. Travis County is one of the areas that's getting one of those 2 new congressional seats, okay? Texas currently has 36 congressional seats. Now they're going to have 38. And so you've got District 37 right there. If you can see that on the map, if we pull it up there on the screen, you can see District 37 runs right down there, basically the middle of Travis County, scooping up Austin, the capital city, as well as a little bit of Williamson County, and frankly, just from looking at it, may actually be the Austin part of Williamson County is kind of what it looks like to me. That's something that, at least progressives in Austin have been wanting for a long time. They've said, we want our own congressional seat. Now they've got it.
They did, and they got it at the cost of basically making all of the other congressmen around there safe Republicans, right? Sure. So Michael McCall, who used to represent an increasingly more competitive district, is now in a solid Republican district. Chip Roy had a, I think, +3 or 4 Trump district. It's now a +20 Trump district. So you basically took a lot of those areas that were liberal and bleeding into some of these other suburban districts and shoved them all into one Democrat seat. Instead of giving that as a net Republican seat, they basically said we're going to shore up the Republican swing districts we have.
To your point, I mean, Congressional District 10, Mike McCall's seat, it's not necessarily displayed well on this one, but that's a fairly large geographic district, right? It extends far east of Austin. And in this map, right, in the proposed boundary, you can see it kind of bleeds through this small sliver there in North
Williamson.
Austin to go towards Lakeway, right, and West Austin. That's certainly, to pick up to your point, right, kind of reinforce his seat that's been more and more competitive the last few cycles.
An interesting observation, too, that I think is worth noting, we saw the same thing in the state Senate map. They took Jane Nelson's Denton district and drew it down into the Highland Park area in Dallas. They take Michael McCall's district and draw it around that Lake Travis area. Republicans are also motivated by their donors, and you see them make efforts to basically find regions in the state where they raise a lot of money, which Lake Travis has a lot of fundraising capability, a lot of wealthy individuals. A lot of those individuals are Republicans, but they live in Travis County and are represented mostly by Democrats. And so Republicans will kind of bend over backwards to try to reach some red district into these donor enclaves to be able to give them, the feeling of importance that they actually get to be represented by a Republican.
Right, and so look, you really do get that absolute split right now. I think it's important to say, though, for folks who kind of know this area a little bit better of Central Texas, is that while Williamson County, Hays County to the south may be more Republican than certainly downtown Austin, right, or something like that, the conventional thinking is that perhaps in the next 10 years that will be less so.
Correct. Williamson's definitely moving bluer and bluer every cycle. We could see a temporary pushback and a bounce back to a little bit more of a red county this November, but there's no doubt that the demographics and also so many people moving into Austin are having to bleed up into Williamson.
It's that urban sprawl, right, that you see kind of taking place all over. I think the perfect example of that is certainly here, where it's like, to your point, right, we're talking about the city of Austin proper bleeding over into other counties. I mean, I'm a homeowner in Hutto, and I can tell you that the demographics and politics of Hutto have changed in 5 years, right? From people not only moving outside the state, but just moving outside of Austin because it's too expensive.
I think it's a good transition here because this is Central Texas, kind of move on down to South Texas, but going down into, first looking at the San Antonio area up there. If we've got the map pulled up, it's right there at the top of the South Texas map. You've got actually one district, a district that has been drawn. This District 35 from that takes the kind of east portion of Travis County, actually stretches all the way down in a very thin. I think they used to call that area or one of those districts the Fajita Strip or something like that. It's even thinner now, I think, right?
It's smaller
like
fajita.
That's long-term Congressman Lloyd Doggett, right? And I guess kind of the takeaway from bringing in 37 is they kind of did that, right, where it's a smaller sliver.
Yeah, so you've got that district, right? That is where you expect perhaps
either an open seat. I think the expectation is that Lloyd Doggett is likely to run for the Travis County centric seat, which then takes his old seat, which is still a blue district, and makes it a seat open for Democrats. There will probably still be a little bit of a competition between San Antonio and Austin to decide who gets to represent that. It probably and should be a Travis County Democrat that will take that over.
The other thing that strikes my eye here is this District 15, which now sidesteps pretty much, I think, all of Bexar County. A lot of the Democrat vote there, but actually goes down all the way down to the border in Hidalgo. Potential pickup opportunity for Republicans?
Go ahead, Jeremy.
Sure. We've talked about this previously. I think yes. I think it's maybe less so, right? But it is something that's possible, I think, is kind of the takeaway. What I see in this, dovetailing with Congressional District 27, 27 is represented by Michael Cloud, I believe. And he's generally a fairly conservative lawmaker down that way. And he picks up quite a few counties. I think it's 3 or 4 of the counties from 15 to make 15 more competitive, which is interesting there. And for folks from kind of the Rio Grande Valley area, right, where especially as of recent, right, whether it be under former President Trump, you kind of see those politics changing. It'll be interesting to see how this, if these maps hold, how this goes next election cycle for sure.
District 15 went for Biden. The previous District 15 went for Biden by 2 percentage points. And the newly drawn district went for Trump by 3 percentage points. And so now Trump also, one of the things that people forget is that in the suburban areas, Trump underperformed the rest of the Republicans. That's why Beth Van Dyne could represent a district that Biden won by 5. In the Valley, Trump overperformed most Republicans. And so the reality is that though that is, yes, a Trump plus 3, there were a lot of Democrats in the Valley that were voting for Trump, I think probably because of the willingness to engage on the cultural level on issues that mattered to them more than your traditional GOP. So if Republicans run someone who's generally reticent to engage on the culture issues and Democrats find a candidate in the Valley that actually knows how to kind of talk their language and stay a little bit more in the middle of the road, this district might not be so easy for Republicans to pick up.
Interesting. The last big area, and it's the biggest area of the state, of course, which is the Houston area. greater Houston area. Taking a look at those maps, this is another situation where you've really got some real tweaking of some of these districts. I mean, I think not so much as we see in DFW, but probably second here. What are your first impressions when you look at this new Harris County, Fort Bend County, Chambers County, this Houston area map?
Really growing area. Wesley Hunt, who previously ran against Liz Fletcher, has already announced his intention to run for that open congressional District 38.
38 being the second new created
That's the
district.
second created district, and it is a plus, I think, I don't remember, 18, 17 Republican districts, so it really should stay red for quite some time. Wesley was backed by a lot of D.C. insiders and leadership. Republicans really like this guy nationwide. The D.C. more establishment types have recruited him. Dan Crenshaw sees him as an ally. They're both a little bit more your middle-of-the-road kind of cut with their politics, and so he's going to be running in that seat. I do find something really interesting with what they did with Lizzie Fletcher, and it's the same thing they did with Colin Allred, the same thing they did with Henry Cuellar. These are three moderate Democrats, and I know that sounds like an oxymoron to a lot of people, but the reality is in comparison to AOC and other people within the caucus, these are people who are loyal to leadership. These are people who try to not buck the system and are considered more reasonable in comparison to like outright socialists. And so what they did was they took their districts that were swing districts and they made them hard Democrat districts. And so, you know, you'd rather have a middle-of-the-road Lizzie Fletcher representing a hard Democrat district and then giving Republicans less competition within the Houston area. It seems like that's what Republicans were trying to do, both empowering these moderate Democrats to represent very liberal areas. It could also set up an interesting primary if these Democrats keep governing in the middle. What you'll probably see is they'll all lurch a little left as their constituency turns.
In addition to Lizzie, Jeremy, we were talking, you've also got some potential shakeups for some of the other incumbent Democrats in the area, potentially.
Sure, potentially. I think we were talking about Al Green's district, right, coinciding, I think, with Sheila Jackson Lee there in Congressional District 18. That'll be interesting to see. There's long been talk on whether any of them are potentially done and retiring. And so I think that maybe kind of tips the scales for that thing. I think, you know, obviously Al Green is notoriously famous for, for going after Donald Trump over the last 2 to 4 years, I suppose. But to me, the more notable thing is, and you kind of alluded to this a little bit, right? So you have Kevin Brady, a Republican who's retiring. That's Congressional District 8. It's not necessarily best represented on this map, but that's northern, right, greater Houston area there. His district kind of gets pilfered a little bit, and it's for someone like Dan Crenshaw, who's Congressional District 2 currently, you see that district kind of protrude north a little bit into CD8. I think that's interesting. It's always funny to see people that have already announced their retirements, right? And then that district kind of becomes a sacrificial lamb in a lot of ways and pilfered, and I think that's a good example of that one. But you also see, I think it's Congressional District 29 in that one. That's Sylvia Garcia, former state senator here, right? I guess she's a sophomore congressman now. Her district changes just a little bit there in eastern Harris County. You notice it doesn't branch over anymore in the northeast portion of Houston. So that's a little interesting. I don't know the split, though, on that one. So I don't know if that, you know,
it's still definitely a solid
worse.
Democrat district at the end of the day. I think Dan Crenshaw, them actually splitting Montgomery County, Jeremy makes a great point in saying that whenever you announce your retirement early, your district usually gets taken advantage of. And I think we would expect to see that as Texas House maps come out this week.
Yeah, absolutely.
We have quite a few members who are retiring or moving on to something else, and those districts are going to be chopped up at the benefit of other incumbents that are staying in place. So we're anticipating that on the Texas House level. Montgomery County now has 2 congressmen. They've previously only had 1. I also think for Dan Crenshaw, somebody who's building up his political operation to try to go statewide in some form or fashion. There's no secret that Dan Crenshaw wants to be a senator, a governor, or a lieutenant governor, something. He now branches out into the greater Houston area to give himself more name ID and entree into activists and donors in Montgomery County. So you see some various advantages to several people.
Yeah, I mean, to wrap up on this map in that district, you've already got some candidates who have announced in that Kevin Brady seat to replace him. But, you know, even as recently as last week, I've heard some chatter from folks down there in Montgomery County in that area who've said that State Representative Steve Toth was taking a look at it. This map would seem to put a dent in that plan.
Yeah, it definitely is. Morgan Luttrell, who is running in that seat. Marcus Luttrell is his brother, who was the lone survivor, the gentleman who the movie was made off of, heroic combat veteran. So Morgan, his brother, who's also a veteran, is running and supported by Crenshaw. You can see that.
And Rick Perry.
And Rick Perry and several people. And it seems
Yeah.
like they probably teamed up together to both take away the Montgomery County advantage as much for anybody in Montgomery County looking at taking on Morgan, who's kind of seen as the front runner, and then benefit Dan at the same time. So it does seem like there were some political games being played.
I mean, there's like 10 announced candidates in that race. And to your
Yes.
point,
Yeah.
Morgan is certainly,
That's
I
a
think, the
big
guy
one.
that everyone talks about or more
Yes.
favored. But there are, I mean, that's, this is what happens in open seats, especially
Yeah.
on the congressional level, is it's kind of this all hands on deck, everyone
Absolutely.
goes. So.
Absolutely. So let's talk a few big picture things before we wrap up this afternoon. One, I think it's important to say, we said this at the top, but I want to say it right now. These are just proposals, and
Yep.
they could change,
Yep.
right? But what we are hearing right now, Luke, we mentioned this right before we went live, is that apparently the Republicans in Congress approve of this map right now.
That's right, they do. And there is more chance for these maps to change than legislative maps to change because the State House rolls out its map, so it's already cutting all of its deals. The State Senate rolls out its map, it's already cut all of its deals. So after they come out, there's only a handful of little tweaks that get made if there's some last minute deal that gets cut. But in Congress, at the end of the day, this is the legislature drawing Congress's maps.
Yeah.
And so there is more room for changes. The Senate has introduced this version. Last week, we heard a lot of different stories about the Senate, the House, Congress just not agreeing on the congressional maps.
Right.
And so it looks like maybe the Senate and Congress have come up to a little bit of an agreement with the Senate introducing this, Congress saying we've endorsed this plan, but the Texas House has said nothing of the sort. So you could see the Texas House get this and say, no, we have a different idea. So if you're, especially in the Houston or DFW area, your representative could still change over the next couple weeks.
I think what I always like to note about this process, because it's certainly a political process, is this is the first time in over 50 years that Texas will not be under the additional kind of federal scrutiny. I think it's known as preclearance, right? Now, almost inevitably, this, at some level, these go to the courts, right? But it's important to take away that a lot of the negotiations happening behind the scenes are happening with that in mind, right? They already know. They've got a team of lawyers, right, that are there. Okay, does this qualify? Do we apply the rules in the right way, right? And so it does not happen necessarily in a bubble. There's a lot of conversations happening, granted not in public yet, right? This is our first kind of look publicly at them, but just know those are also ongoing conversations.
All right,
So.
and last thing here before we wrap it up, what are the next steps in this process?
I think it depends on how quickly they want to act on this, right? To your point, we have not seen the House file any bill related to redistricting as of yet. The Senate has filed bills for their own maps, the 31 Senate districts, for the 15 State Board of Education districts, and now they have filed, I think this is Senate Bill 6, have filed the proposed congressional district maps. There's nothing that stops the House from necessarily doing that. But it tells me that we're on day 8 of the ongoing special session.
Right.
We have not seen not only a map, I have not seen House Republican leadership speak publicly about anything with regard to this. It tells me that there's either still negotiations happening behind the scenes, or there's something that they are not agreeable to yet to release it publicly, and who knows how long that might take, right? So.
What we also know is that Governor Abbott is desperately trying to have the primary as soon as possible because it means the shortest amount of time he has to actually campaign to Republicans. He would love to move on to independents. And so I do think there's a lot of incentive in the governor's office, a lot of pressure in the governor's office to try to wrap these maps up so that they can begin the court process and try to have that primary as early as possible.
Keep in mind, not to keep us here any longer, but they did pass last legislative or special session. They passed a bill, kind of the safety net bill, if you will, that created these kind of threshold dates. I think 3 different ones on depending on when the redistricting maps are done. This delays the candidate filing period. This delays the primary election date or the primary runoff election date. So that passed last special session.
Yep.
It's solely dependent on one, when it gets out of the legislature, and two, when they get final approval.
When
they go to the courts.
they can finally push this through, and we'll be watching that when it happens. Jeremy, Luke, thank you so much for joining me to explain this, and thank you everybody for tuning live. We're going to be continuing to look at these maps, break them down. We're going to have a write-up on that soon at texasscorecard.com. You can check that out, and we'll be following the process. But for right now, thank you for joining us this afternoon.